One of the most common questions we get as a general contractor is, what is the cost to build a house or to do a major renovation? And there's several costs and expenses that go into construction, and they range anywhere from site acquisition, site improvement, foundation, framing, the mechanicals, which is your electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and then even finishes, things from paint and interior trim. So we're going to go through. This is a great article from Quicken Loans of what some of those costs might be, and it also varies geographically. Factors like labor and supply shortages jacked up some of these costs in 2021 and probably going to continue into 22. And part of that has to do with there's not as many contractors out there, and a lot of the people who are workers, employees of contractors, have left the industry. So average pricing to build a house, and again, you'll see a big range, depends on the size. National average is about 284, and it can go up to a million depending on how big the house is. And the range, somewhere between 119 for a low level house to 451. So what's the cost per square foot? They peg the price here between 100 and 200 per square foot. However, in most instances, the client building a house is going to want some more things factored into that cost. So it's going to be more like 250 to 300. They talk about even as high as 500, but most of that difference is from high-end interior trim. Granite countertops, wood floors, high-end appliances, or other finishes like tray ceilings or crown moldings. There's no hard and fast rule, and we'll talk about how to maybe keep the cost of your home build down into this range. Even if you want high-end finishes, you can add those at a later date, which might be cheaper than doing it up front. So here's some costs by the number of bedrooms. This is not very helpful. 150 to 800, that doesn't help you at all in terms of figuring out what the value is. But location is also an important part. Some states are cheaper to build in. You can see Alabama, 200 to 380 is a lot cheaper than California, 200 to 600. All right, you notice Connecticut is very high, 800,000. Right, most of the states are in the 400 to 500 thousand range, almost $1 million to build at the high end in New York. Here's the cost breakdown. Plot of land to start with. You can buy a lot in a lot of places for under $10,000, depending upon the nature of the property. A lot of times you're going to spend more like $60,000 or $70,000 for an infill lot in a subdivision or a buildable lot. It's also going to depend upon, are there already utilities at the lot? Are there sewer hookups? Is there electrical hookup? Is there water hookup? If it's a property that would have a septic, is the land either suitable for septic or have a septic permit in place? You can find unfinished lots in rural areas. It'll be cheaper to buy, but it might be a little more expensive to prepare. Here's the thing. First step is you have to do site work, site preparation. And that talks mostly about clearing the lot. If there's trees on it, you got to cut them down, clear them away. If it's bumpy or has rocks, you got to grade the lot. One of the first things you'll need to do if it's going to need a septic is to get a septic plan and put in that base system, or at least plot it out before you start building the house to make sure you have the right setbacks from the structure and the lot lines to the septic. If you build a house first or start the foundation before you have your septic either in place or plotted out, a lot of times you can completely blow out of the water your septic plan, and sometimes it'll be impossible to build a septic afterwards. Then you have to do some building permits, right? Those are going to cost thousands of dollars. The base permit, electrical, HVAC, you got to factor that in. Your contractors are going to factor into this equation in a lot of ways. Your GC is probably going to be 10, 15, sometimes 20%. And in some cases, you're going to find that the general contractor can price it as a percentage of the total cost, or they can even do hourly. Sometimes that may be a better way to go depending on what your GC is going to do. Remember that your general contractor is not going to be the one physically doing the framing or the electrical or the plumbing. Sometimes the general contractor will have its own carpenters But even within that industry, there are some things that are specialized. For example, concrete work. Pouring, making forms for pouring foundational cement and concrete. And each contractor has a certain specialty. Once you get that set up and your contract is done, you're going to have to pour foundation. That's going to be could be $8,000 to $10,000, depending upon if it's a slab, is it a floating monolithic, is it stem wall. You can get really expensive if you have a finished basement or you have an enclosed basement. It can be tens of thousands. After the foundation's done, then you start building things that look like a house that you recognize. You're going to do framing. That's when you start seeing stud walls and 2x4s and floor joist systems, and each one of the levels being put together. And eventually you're going to top it off with either roof trusses or framed roof, and you'll have the structure of the house that looks familiar to you, what the house is supposed to look like. And once that's done, then you start doing exterior. You start drying in the house. And first you're going to start doing the outside shell of the house, whether it's stucco or it's siding. And you're going to start seeing windows and doors being put in. And the last normal step will be the roofing material, shingles or roof tiles. Once that's done, now your house is dried in, and you can start doing some of the finish work on the inside. The exterior work is an expensive part. It's tens of thousands of dollars, and it depends on the number of openings and the level of your finishings. That's normally something you can change, so you want to make sure that's done the way you want it the first time. Then you're going to start adding your mechanicals. Electrical, HVAC, and plumbing are the biggest ones. Sometimes if there's custom mechanicals, like audio systems or alarm systems, those go in as well. Those go in before you start putting up drywall and inside finishing. Those are expensive. Those are also tens of thousands because there's a lot of labor involved in the case of electrical and HVAC. There's devices. You may not sound like a lot of money, but hundreds and hundreds of feet of wire can cost thousands of dollars. Your air conditioning system is thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And then the labor is very, very complicated for that. Then you start doing finishes. Once you have your drywall up, you start putting in cabinets, you start putting in doors, door frames, moldings, flooring. Those are things that, unless they're required for your certificate of occupancy, you may be able to skimp on at first to get a bigger house, more square footage, or cut your costs initially, and then maybe go back and add them later. Trim work done later, it may add a little bit more to the cost later, but you can also make some decisions about that trim work after you've lived in the house. Sometimes you may not want as much crown molding or judges paneling or other types of trim work as you might have thought initially. You can also even change kitchen finishings after the fact. You probably want to get your appliances done how you want them to be from day one, and that pretty much has a completed house as far as costs. At the very end, you want to make sure you have a certificate of occupancy and have your builder sign off on all your lien waivers, and all your subs sign lien waivers, so you can then move into your home and make sure that the numbers add up the way they're supposed to, and that your punch list is done. And a lot of times builders are required in most states to have a certain warranty, so if you have issues that come up later, they have to address those for you. Building a house can be a way to save some money if you do it correctly over buying a pre-built house. Don't get too crazy with building a house to your own taste if it's not going to be resaleable later. If you have bedrooms that are too small or too big, if you have a floor plan that doesn't flow where you're the only one that's going to love that floor plan, that may cost you down the road with resale. So work with your architect to make sure they do things in a way that, number one, fit your needs, but also are suitable in the market. Plus, if you're building your own house and you're designing your own house with an architect, make sure they work with your general contractor to maybe make some adjustments that might make the house cheaper to build. Sometimes a feature that you just love as far as a design feature might cost tens of thousands of dollars in extra construction cost because it needs a certain type of beam to carry weight, or 100 hours more labor. and you may decide, this little detail we thought was going to be cheap, but now that we find out it's going to cost a lot more, we can eliminate it. So your architect work with your general contractor to make sure that your design needs aren't creating extra expenses that you don't really care about those design needs as much once you know about how much it's going to cost. It's a good overview of building a new house. If you have questions, you can reach us through our website, securebuilders.com. We'd be glad to help.